your time and your efforts to be here. We've been talking about growing, maturing, getting better. Can we agree that that's something we all need to work on? Again, that's not a negative thing. That's just a true statement. You know, what is the challenge though? How do we get there? What is the message giving us? If we go to the gym, you know, if you're a gym person, you go to the gym and you work with a trainer. They create a program for you. You know, they tell you what to work out and how to do it and how to eat and all those good things. All of that gearing you toward your goal, whatever it might be, whether it's to be in better shape or to lose weight or to whatever your physical fitness goals are. What I want us to see today is that God has written a plan out for us. And it's right here in Scripture. It's right here before us. He's written a plan out for us and how to walk. How to remove things, how to add things, how to recognize the need for change. And he even gives us some examples. And that's the really cool part is we don't have to keep searching and looking like how. He tells us all. It's right here before us how to maintain these things. Even after we've been on this program for a while, we get to see that. So it's truly incredible and it's easy to follow if we'll listen. It's easy to follow if we'll participate. Of course, what's the key word there? If. That's what's been presented to us. Visible illustrations are always an easy picture, right? We can see something when it's been painted out before us, or we see it presented, or whether it's on a screen or whatever the case. Last week, we talked about using, and we had the illustration of a mirror. You know, we look in the mirror, what's there is there, right? That's just the fact. This morning, I want us to picture in the theaters of our mind, if you will, a baby. Okay? Now, again, we talked a little bit about babies last week and all the different, but today I just want you to think about a baby. Their story of growth is their life, right? It's their life. It's what we witness happening before us. They are born. They start to grow. We take 1,000,000 pictures, you know. Get all the storage you need on your phones because you're going to need it. You're going to take one of every little ooh and ah moment. It's going to happen, okay? We take pictures, we take videos. They crawl, they walk, they start talking and then writing and reading and learning, and soon talents are noticed. And before long, 18 years have passed, and they're out to try to find their way in the world. That's kind of how the journey goes, right? That's the picture that we see. That's the progression. That's certainly a condensed version. There's a lot in between and a lot of other things that we could have some fun with. But this gives us the idea, right? This gives us the picture. We talked last week about when Jesus told Nicodemus, you what? Must be born again. So, you know, there was no way to leave that part out. This is a must. You have to have that. So we talked about a new birth, a do-over, if you will, coming to Christ and the new life that presents us with, giving us the opportunity to become a new creation. But how do we get there? How does all of the components of that begin to work? It is our faith walk. It is how we begin to look. How does this work itself out? Is it, should be the question. Is it as clear and visible as the illustration of the baby, the birth, the growth, the maturity? It's the same concept, right? It's the same consecutive actions. So the question we have to ask ourselves is it there? Is it there? And if not, what do we do to get it there? If not, how do we find ourselves in that place that we are growing and maturing and walking and all of those things? How do we get there? I was writing and preparing this. It reminded me of an old song that I remember from a long, long time ago. It's just an old song from, I don't know when it was written, but I like the words here, what it says, because when we begin to think about time and we begin to think about serving the Lord and growing with the Lord, what does that look like? These old words that says, since I started for the kingdom, since my life He controls, Since I gave my heart to Jesus, the longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows. I love that. I love that because when we think about in these words, it says, since I started for the kingdom. That speaks of a specific purpose. That's where I'm headed. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm looking after. Then it says, since my life he controls. That speaks of surrender. I've given him my life. I've given him my heart. Direction and directions are so important. In other words, the where am I headed and how do I get there? We all need that in life, right? Where am I headed, but how do I get there? You know, someone tells you today, meet me at so-and-so. What's the first thing we do? If you don't know where it's at, you whip out the phone and put it in the GPS gimmick, right? That's what we all do. We all do. Just looking for somewhere to go right now. But that's what we do. We instantly are looking for how to get there. So the direction, but the directions are very important. Where am I going? How do I get there? Let's turn to our text today, verse 1, chapter 2 of 1 Peter. Peter writes, therefore, rid yourselves. Okay, here is where we start. This is the message. This is what he's trying to say. Rid yourselves. Get out. Remove. These things have to go all. All. Now that's a very, very important word because that doesn't leave anything out, right? He says all. We've talked about the importance of that word. All deceit, all hypocrisy, all envy, and all, so we see that word again, all slander. Why do these need to go? Why do these need to get out of the way if we're going to grow? Well, let's look at a couple of them. Deceit. Jesus was real. And by that, I don't mean just his physical presence and walking and talking, but he dealt with reality. He did not trick people. He didn't use smoke and mirrors. He just shared the simple gospel truth. That's what he did. There was no deception there. There was no trickery there. So Peter here said, deceit's got to go. We don't need to use tricks and mirrors and all kinds of stuff to try to get. Let's tell them the truth. Just tell them about Jesus. Simple gospel. As we walk in him, as we grow in him, he calls us to do the same thing. Very, very simple. No deceit. You know, there's no false advertising. Just what it is. We serve Jesus. That's it. That's the bottom line. And Paul would talk about that. We preach Jesus and him crucified. That's it, period. And so he was very clear about that. Peter goes on and he says, hypocrisy. Jesus called out the Pharisees for this very thing. In other words, you're not practicing what you're preaching. And that's a very, very important thing to him. It goes back to being real. I think all of us could agree that we live in a time to where maybe we've never seen skepticism at the level that we see it right now. Nobody believes anything. You know, there's always a question mark behind everything. What is that real? Is this not? Everything gets questioned. Let me say today, without any doubt, without any hesitation, our faith and where we stand should never be in that category. It should be very, very clear who we are, what we believe, and what we stand for. There should be no question about that. The hypocrisy he's saying here is you can't present this and do this. It's got to be the same, which goes back to deceit. You see how those things tie together? He said we can't have that if we're going to be growing in Christ. And that is not just our numerical growth, but ourselves. If I'm walking and talking in Jesus, I got to be real. I can't just say it. Envy. How easy is it to get jealous? It kind of seems to be just kind of a natural trait, right? It just comes out, oh, they got more, or they did better. I mean, it's a very, very easy place to go. The comparison game, all the different stuff. But here's the question. When we get bound by that, you know, the jealousy, the envy, I'm mad at you because you're doing better than me or whatever, does any of that represent Jesus? Does that spirit represent him at all? It's a very easy place to get. You can look down the road, well, this place is doing better, or that guy's got a bigger house, or they got a big, we can get into that. We can do that, and it's a very easy place to go. But if we are representing him, That spirit does not do that. That does not show anybody anything but just humanity. It's not about material things. It's about how we represent him to others. And that is so, so important. And if we take our focus off of where he calls us to go, then we go down like Peter. To taking our eyes off Jesus, he went right down in the water. Lord, help me. That's where we find ourselves when we're not focusing in on him. Because, and I'm talking to myself as much as I am anybody, it is a very, very easy trap to get into because we look around and there are some that are doing better. Or at least it appears so on the surface, right? Again, whether they got a bigger crowd this morning than we do, or whether, you're at work tomorrow and this person's got a better position than you do, or their bank account's bigger, or they met a better grade on the test. We can always find the comparison game, right? But God called you and me to be just that, you and me. And he said, follow me. Don't follow the world. And again, when we go back to the simplicity of the gospel, no deceit, no hypocrisy, no envy, keeping our eyes on Christ allows us to see the souls of others rather than what they have. And I believe that. When Jesus looked from the cross and he said, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. These are the very same people who had just mocked and spit and hit and literally nailed him. And he said, forgive them. He saw the souls. He saw the value of their souls in that I still want to save them. They've been awful to me and they've ridiculed me and scorned me and all this other stuff, lied about me, but I still want to save them. That's so powerful when we begin to embrace that. And there is no envy in that. There is no hypocrisy in that. There is no deceit in that at all. That is the purity of God's heart that he wants to see. It says very, very clearly that God desires that none should perish. And we look around and we see a lot of bad stuff going on in the world today. And I wrote a little bit about it this past week. The headlines are filled with this one and that one and everything went wrong. But the Bible says pray for those. Don't glory in someone's fall. Pray for them. Now we may say, well, they deserved it. Some people might. Some people might. Consequences are real. You do harm. There was someone yesterday somewhere, I think it was up in Detroit or somewhere, that opened fire on a splash pad where kids are. They hadn't found them yet. Okay, do they deserve to be taken out of society in a way where they can't hurt people? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we need to pray that God would save that person's soul. They are so lost. And again, that's not having mercy. God can only do that. We tend to not, right? But that's what he's called us to do. And that's why Peter here is saying, you got to get rid of all this stuff if you're going to represent him. It starts to make sense when we start thinking about that, right? And so we look at this, and he goes on and he says, slander. I believe that never has there been a time when people are so unkind to one another as they are right now, especially with words. And here's the problem with words. They don't have to be true. One post, one viral video, and a person's life has changed forever, and they might not be able to get it back. They might not be able to argue. They might not be able to fight. They might not be able to do anything, and it's changed their life forever. Churches, believers, and pastors that we're recently seeing all across social media and everything are not exempt. We're not exempt. I just told Charlie this morning, for the next 3 weeks, Melissa and the girls are heading out for Wisconsin. I'm going to be here and at home. You won't see me anywhere. because you just can't. You got to be so careful nowadays, right? You don't know what people are going to say about you or anything, and it doesn't have to be true. And that's why he says slander's got to be put out of your mouth. It's got to be put out of your mouth, and because it does not help the kingdom. It only hurts. Peter says here, these things have to go. These things have to go. But if that's the case, so typically when we get rid of something, what do? We replace it with something else, right? The old is out, the new is in. Jesus said you must be born again. Paul would later on say, if the old has passed away, you become a what? New creation. So we've gotten out of something. We've gotten rid of something. What do we replace it with? What do we put in after all this is gone? Verse 2, like newborn infants. He's speaking there to the born again. Desire is what he's saying. Desire. In other words, go after, pursue pure milk of the word. Peter, Paul, all of them are saying, this is our answer. It's right here. Everything is contained. This is our workout program. This is our trainer's program that's been laid out for us day by day, what to do, how to do it, what to eat, how to work out, all these things. It's all right here. He said, desire the pure milk of the word. What does that mean? That thing which nourishes us. That thing which promotes growth and helps us get better spiritually. That which helps us mature in the process. In other words, the answers are here. But if we don't pursue it, what happens? We don't find it. That's why Jesus would say, seek and you will find. Ask and it'll be answered. It's an action thing. You know, when something lays on the shelf dormant and just collects dust, it does you no good. Whether it's a book, whether it's a tool, it doesn't matter what it is. If you never use it, it doesn't help you. Well, we've been given the pure milk of the word. And the reason that we can say that with clarity, and I'll get to that in a minute, is because we know where it comes from. Pure milk. He means not spoiled, not tainted, not flavored. In other words, find out what it really says. And it's not about the opinion of this person or that person. God says, sit down and talk to me. If you want to know what I'm saying, if you want to know what I mean, talk to me. Doesn't that make sense? You know, if I want to know what you think and I want to know directly your answer, who better to ask than you? You know, I mean, that doesn't make any sense to go to somebody else to find out what this guy said. You know, that's hearsay. I want to hear it from you. Because as we all know, you know, in the legends of fish tales, I mean, it starts off as a minnow and then it ends up a whale before it's gotten around the room, you know. And I used to work that on crime scenes. You'd get to a car crash and there's 5 people on the road. There's 5 different stories, you know, and whatever. That's just humanity. We do that. Peter says here, get rid of all that stuff. And desire. That word's important. Desire. Look after, pursue, go after the pure milk of the word. This requires that we know the heart of the word, which requires that we have a true relationship with Christ because he is the word. John chapter 1. That's so important how all this comes together as we're pursuing the things of God. Then it would make sense that we find out what he means. What is he saying? What is he speaking unto us? And then the second part of this, why does this matter? The second part of this in verse 2, he says, so that you may what? Grow up into your salvation. How important is that? He said, if you take of this pure milk, and again, we go back to the baby. They get the formulas and mom feeds them and all this other stuff when they're little. Why? So they grow. So they get stronger and they can start doing the things that we hope to see them do, walking and crawling and talking and all that stuff. We want to, well, that's what, when we've been born again, when we've come and we've got a brand new start, a brand new slate, life has started and we're trying to do our thing, we got to know how to do it, right? We've got the instructions. But he's saying these things will get in your way if you don't get them out of the way. But once you get them in the way, here's your desire. Here's where you go. Here's how you grow up, mature, expand, understand more, grasp the importance of, live in the gift that we've been given. I mean, think about the beauty of what we've been given here. That doesn't work if the old things are still in place. You know, it's kind of like buying a brand new car, but you ask them to take that engine out and put the old engine into the broke car. It looks good. You don't go nowhere. You know, the old and the new, they don't mix. The old's got to go. The new is what takes over and even Paul would say that. When I became a man, when I became an adult, I put away childish things. You know, it's one thing to be immature and play with our kids and laugh and whatever. But there's a point in time that we have to mature, right? Paul is saying here, Peter's saying here, and the Lord is saying it, Jesus is teaching us very clearly, if you follow me, and we'll see this later in the latter verses here, 21, I'm your example. What did he do? How did he act? How did he treat others? What did he show us? We recognize the need in our lives. We recognize the need for physical change when we don't feel good, right? Well, I need to change this or change that. We recognize the need for maybe the clothes don't fit anymore. We gotta change something. We can figure out different stuff along the way that says, well, I need to do this or that. But for a believer, when do we recognize the need? When is it noticeable? When should it be saying to me, I need to do a little bit better? Peter gives us this in verse 3. If you have tasted that the Lord is good. In other words, if you've been exposed to this, you know. If you've understood this, you know. And if you have done that, if you have tasted that the Lord is good, David would write this in the Psalms, taste and see that the Lord is good. When we recognize his goodness, then we need to confirm that we are reflecting that in our lives, that it's not just words, it's not just hearsay, it's the real thing. No, I said it, I meant it, and I live on it. I mean, it's real. Again, there's no deceit, there's no hypocrisy, there's no envy, it's real. And that's what he's saying. If you have done that, if you have come and you know that this is real, and you know that God has changed your life, this should be reflective in your life. Doesn't that make sense? Again, we go back to the physical things. If you're diligently going and training your body to look a certain way or to get in a better condition, eventually it's going to show. It's not that you're parading around like a pride peacock, but you're going to look healthier. There's going to be physical changes. Shouldn't that apply to our spiritual lives? Again, we're not walking around with our nose up in the air. Hey, look at me, how great I am. I'm saved and you're not. And no, it's none of that kind of stuff. Jesus didn't act that way. I'm on my way to heaven and you're not. No, we don't. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying, show everybody you can have it too. I'm so fortunate that I found it, but you can have it too. Let me tell you what this means: the reflection of his goodness, the old wow moment. He's been so good to me. He's been so good to me. When that moment hits, we have to do an inventory of our lives, friends. We have to do an inventory to see where things line up and where they don't. But Pastor, it's so hard. I mean, is it too hard? It might be just too hard. I don't know if I can do that. I mean, can we do better? We're just mere humans after all, right? I mean, we're not perfect. And how easy is it to make excuses? How easy is it to justify not doing something? It's very simple. And we can talk ourselves out of anything. And it doesn't even have to be something wrong or bad. We can talk ourselves out of anything. We may not reach perfection. In fact, we won't reach perfection on this side of glory, okay? But that's not our goal. Our goal is to show Jesus in our life, show that change, let everybody know this has happened, this is real. Just like when the woman at the well left, she came running into town and said, "Oh, let me tell you what he's done for me." And all the others, like the blind guy that he healed with the mud on his eyes, he said, "I don't know what happened, but I was once blind and now I see." I mean, it's that beautiful, beautiful analogy that we see in these things. While we very well will not be perfect on this side of the glory, here's the thing, friends. We've got a perfect example to follow. Can we believe that today? We've got a perfect example to follow, which allows us to have the strength to hold on. It allows us to have the strength to not give up and hang on for a better day. Where do we turn to? Where do we learn? Verse 21. For we were called to this. Okay, so he's saying here, this is a specific assignment, if you will, because God believes in us. How many people struggle with that today? That I'm no good, I can't do this, I can't do that, and everybody says that that I fall short or I'm a loser. A lot of people struggle with that, that self-confidence thing. I struggled with it for years. This is saying to us very, very clearly in verse 21, for you were called to this, your specific assignment, because Christ also suffered. He understands the reality of the struggle. That's what that means. Christ also suffered for who? For you. Leaving you what? An example. Think about that. Jesus left us an example, our greatest example ever, our greatest illustration ever. He said he left us an example that you should what? Follow in his steps. What did Jesus call for all to do? Follow me. When we follow one, we emulate them, right? We watch what they do. We don't just mimic their moves. You know, some might, but we follow their ways. We listen to what they say. It influences our life. You don't believe that? Why do you think social media is so important today in the lives of young people? It starts fashion trends, hair trends, this trend and that trend. Some are good and some are not. We see all these different things. Jesus said, follow me. That's a singular directive, okay? There's a very, very clear message in that. What does this example provide for us? That it is possible. That it is absolutely possible for us to be more Christ-like, to represent him better and stronger and be more fruitful and let everyone know how much he loves them. We get to do that. We have that ability and we have that. And that he desires not only to love them, but he desires a relationship with them. So now we see why verse 1 matters. You got to get rid of the old stuff, guys. That stuff can't be in place or people won't see Jesus. It's like wearing a mask or some type of hindrance to your appearance. They can't see what you look like if you've got that on, right? They don't know what's really under that hood or under that covering. We got to be real. And then we look at verse 22 and 23. It says this, he did not commit sin, and deceit was found, and no deceit was found in his mouth. And when he was insulted, he did not insult in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. It says here, he did not commit sin, but all the temptation was there. This is what's important to understand. All the temptation was offered. It tells us in Hebrews chapter 14 and verse 15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who was tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin. That's what they call a proof text. He didn't just say it, he did it. When Jesus said, follow me, he was like, this is how you do it. Doesn't that make sense? You know, today's Father's Day, and we think about that, you know, and our kids, especially when they're little, they watch us. They listen to everything that we say. And for anybody that's going to be a new parent, they listen to everything you say. Okay, I promise you, I learned that the hard way when back years ago before I knew the Lord. You know, my little girl scared me a little bit. So anyhow, I said, man, I got to straighten up. But they pick up on stuff quick. But seriously, they watch every move we make. They think about, they listen to every word we say because we're their illustration. We're their model. We're their guy. You know, and it's so important. It's so important that we do that right. Are we going to do it perfect? No. Are we going to have our missteps and our flaws? Absolutely. But I mean, there's value in doing it right, and that's why Jesus said, "Follow me." You know, my daughter, my oldest daughter, that's the mother of my grandchildren. She had a little thing out this morning. She posted, and it did touch my heart. She said, "To the first guy I ever fell in love with." That's the way it should be. Do it right. I didn't say do it, you're going to do it perfect. Just do it right. And Jesus said, follow me. Peter here says, he's your example. He's the one. He lived a sinless life. And we think about that from a perfection situation. Well, I can't do that. He didn't ask you to. He said, follow me. Because if we're focusing on him, we don't focus on all this and that and all this other nonsense that distracts us from everything. We're trying to go the right way. And when we don't get it, he comes along beside us and says, okay, let's do it again. Let's back up and fix that. Let's back up and learn that lesson from that. So we see Peter addressing this in order to show why Jesus is our greatest example. He's one that we can not only look to, but we can learn from. Isn't that important? If we have a teacher that we're listening to, but we can actually learn from them because we realize, wait a minute, they know what they're talking about. You know, they're not just spewing something. They actually are teaching me something. I'm learning something from them. Jesus, we're told, did not commit sin, and he had no deceit in his mouth. Verse 1 tells us that if it's there, it's got to go. You can't have that, right? And when he was insulted, now that's, again, important why it's written that way. When he was insulted, what does that mean? It happened. How many of you ever been insulted in your life? You know? It's very, very possible, you know, and it could be from something someone said, or it could be from something you've seen. You know, we see stuff sometimes that's offensive, or it maybe hurts your feelings or whatever the case. He said, when he was insulted, meaning it happened, he did not insult in return. How does that tie into the first part of this? There was no hypocrisy. He didn't just not do it and then still did it. No, he didn't just say don't do it and did it himself. No, he was insulted. And he didn't insult in return. How easy it is to share that back, though. You know, it's kind of an instantaneous, almost regurgitating type thing. You know, you say something to me, I'm going to zing you back, right? That's just, they saying, if you're really representing me, listen to how I did it. And it's not about being a doormat, guys. It's not about being walked on or about being holier than thou or look at how great. No, it's about that maintaining our integrity as we're watching and knowing that others are watching us. I mean, if we don't realize today, it's been one thing over the course of time. There's always been, and we've talked about that on our Wednesday night study. Every step that Jesus made, the Pharisees seemed to be there. They were watching everything that he did, right? Well, today, that's more literal than it's ever been. Everywhere you step, there's a camera. Whether it's on a wall in a business or whether it's in somebody's pocket, there is nothing hidden today. Nothing. And that's not about trying to live scared or trying to be something you're not. No envy, no hypocrisy, no deceit. But if we're representing him, it's important. And it's not about I'm better than anybody or I'm perfect or I can't have a flaw, but I'm trying to do better. And if I'm representing him, that's in the forefront of my mind, and I'm mindful of that. So here he's saying he had no sin, no deceit. When he was offended, when he was insulted, he didn't do that in return. When he suffered, again, meaning that it happened, he did not threaten. No, he said, Lord, forgive them. Think about that. Think about the power of that. It says that he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. In other words, he leaned on his faith and he walked it out in public. Do we see why a message like this, again, it's not condemning or finger pointing. Do we see why this is a challenge to all of us, right? If we're talking about growing, you know, spiritually and maturity and all this other stuff, it's like, oh boy, I mean, yeah, we could probably use a little work, right? You know, we could use a little faith lift. You know, you get the, you know, but how do we keep our eyes? Why do we keep our eyes on Jesus? Somebody will get that in a minute. But he wasn't just words, friends. He wasn't just words. Verse 24. He himself bore our sins. Think about the power of this, friends. He bore whose sins? Our sins in his body on the tree. So there was a purpose. Having died to sin, we might live righteousness. By his wounds you have been what? Healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but you have now returned to the shepherd and the overseer of your soul. All right, so look at what it's saying here. Bore our sins. He said here, I'll take care of that. I'll take care of that. That's a debt you can't pay. I don't care if you live to be as old as Methuselah, you can't repay that. Okay? And the fact is, if you live to be as old as Methuselah, you'd have a lot more. You know, your debt would be even higher, right? Because that's a long time, 969 years. You know, we struggle after we get past 50 thinking, whew, this is rough. You know, you'd just be an infant if we were Methuselah, right? And so here he's saying, I will take care of that. On the tree, specific, where it happened, took it to the cross, resolving sin's penalty of death. Because what is the wages of sin? Death, okay? He took care of it. He said it's been taken care of. Why did he do that? So that we might. Beautiful word there because that gives us choice. It is offered. Live for righteousness. What does that mean? Change. Give him our heart. Have a new life. Let him be Lord of our life. Desire him. Desire that pure milk. Desire for him and that truth. Seeing the need for change and the need to grow, it opens our eyes, my friends, because when we understand that and we realize we need an example worthy of following. We need an example worthy of following after. And when we read this, we realize, oh, we've got one. In fact, we've got the greatest one, because it goes on, it says, by his wounds. In other words, every lash, every stripe, every part of that torn flesh, it says, you have been healed. When we embrace that, it is because of what he did. It is because of what he did, friends, that we can be made whole. When we embrace that, when we begin to understand the beauty of that, it changes everything. When we embrace the new, then we grow like never before. It changes everything. It's like moving. It's like having an old potted plant that's kind of getting dry and maybe not, and you take it out of that old dried up soil that's no good and you put it in a fresh pot with new this and new that, and before long it's all bright again and it's green and got flowers on it or what. It's a beautiful thing. When we get the old junk out of the way and we start this new path that changes our lives. And when we begin to understand the beauty of, he didn't just say go do it. He did it first. And that is the most powerful part of this example. He made a way because, as we see, again in verse 26, for you were, that's being past tense, meaning you no longer have to be. And that's what I love. You were like sheep going astray. No guidance, no direction. But now you have returned to the shepherd and the overseer of your soul. We have the answer. But here's the question. Will we listen? We have the example of what to do. Will we listen? What changes are needed? What do we need? What changes are needed in order to grow? As we study this, our example's been made pretty clear. I mean, it's not difficult at all. And it's not simply, again, by proclamation or demand, but rather he lived it out and proved that it could be done. He was all human. He was all man. He proved that it could be done. Are you ready to grow? Are you ready to grow? Let's get out anything that's in the way. Let's get it out of the way and put on all the helpful tools. And let's get busy following our example. Amen? Let's get busy following our example. Let's get busy following Jesus. The praise team's going to come back up.